Joining us now is the Superintendent of Avondale Schools, Dr. James Schwarz, with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Dr. Schwarz, thank you for being with us today. My apologies for that. We now have your audio on. How are you? How's your team at Avondale Schools?
We're doing well.
That's good to hear.
We're trying to, make our plans, more granular as we get more information.
That's good. That's good to hear. The budgets are due for school districts on July 1st. Has Avondale completed their budget for next year?
We have, yes. Yep.
And how's that looking based on the potential for cuts both to this year's budget and to next year's funding?
We've anticipated a $700 per student cut. That's the premise that we've been told it's going to be anywhere from $600 to $800 per student cut. That's been the verbiage coming from Lansing for about the last 4 or 5 weeks, and so we planned our budget to go essentially down the middle, and we've planned for a $700 per student reduction.
In terms of how that will impact what's already been spent this year on schools, and also how that's going to bleed over into next year and whatever funds may be available. What's that going to look like? How is this going to directly impact Avondale Schools in the immediate?
Well, certainly, when you're talking that magnitude of a cut, you're talking, when schools are budgets are basically 80% or more of your budget is staffing. It's people. And so it results in certainly, reduction of workforce. And so, we've made reductions going into next year from all facets of our school district, from teachers to secretaries to parapros, administration. We've pared back on positions, and basically we've been fortunate in that it's been through attrition. So folks that, have retired or taking leaves in the fall, we've just not replaced those positions. We've absorbed them. We've consolidated some positions. We're pairing that with what we've built in fund balance to help at least with the first blow of the budget.
And in terms of the students in the schools, with cuts being made to positions or positions not being refilled, as you mentioned, in terms of teachers, in terms of paraprofessionals, how's that going to affect the students directly in terms of either class size or extra attention that may be needed for certain students in their learning process?
Certainly. Well, we've tried to make the bulk of the cuts the furthest away from the classroom as possible. Usually when you're in the mode of cutting, you try to preserve what you can of the classrooms and the direct student experience. And so, you tend to pare away at services that are outside the classroom first, and so some of that is clerical, but it does leach into some support services. So when you're talking parapros, you're talking, those types of ancillary type staffing, it does begin to leach into affecting the student experience, and it's unfortunate because it's right at the time when you need more, as students are coming back with academic deficits, with socio-emotional deficits, and yet you're trimming those very supports because of the lack of state budget. So, so we've been very cognizant of that and trying to, strategically reduce so as not to dramatically impact, but there will be, an impact to student experience, student support as we start the school year.
In terms of needs and in terms of planning for the next school year, communication's been absolutely critical, and partnership's been absolutely critical between Oakland County and individual school districts, and even in partnership between certain school districts. How has that impacted Avondale Schools and their planning and in their plans for the fall? And how critical is collaboration between our local school districts going to be in the execution of plans for all of them in the fall?
Yeah, it's very critical, and we, the 28 superintendents in the county, we have regular meetings where we're touching base with each other collectively as a 28 district group. And then we're also in collaboration with our neighbor districts, individually, and looking at planning scenarios, you know, with whatever guidance we have coming to us. So, we've been careful to be in conversation with each other as we're looking at anything from schedules, or scheduling concepts for the fall, down to PPE and what the PPE materials and protocols will be or could be, down to how many kids on a bus, social distancing guidelines. So there's so many components to this that and yet we're waiting for the ultimate guidance to get really granular on these plans. And so it'll be interesting when the governor releases her protocols and her guidelines next week. I think everybody is bracing themselves for what information is coming in those plans.
Absolutely. And Dr. James Schwarz, Superintendent of Avondale Schools, we just had previously before you Tanya Allen, the chairperson of the Michigan Return to Learn Council, on with us to talk about that. And among the issues that were brought up and were talked about in bulk was the access to technology. And you've mentioned it before. You said it yourself before, and she kind of paraphrased that and alluded to something similar that you said in a previous interview, where you had said access to technology and computers now is as vital as a pencil and a piece of paper for these students, and especially in these times where we're not entirely certain that school is going to be in person in full in the fall, or even beyond that going forward. And we are certain that if that is the case, technology in the form of internet access, in the form of devices, and access to these special programs for each of these school districts is going to be absolutely critical. In terms of bridging that technology gap, is Avondale going to be able to support students that are not in families that have access to the internet or have access to these devices going forward long term?
So we are. I mean, and it's a work in progress. Certainly we went through a learning experience with the remote, the remote period that we just ended at the end of the school year here. So we were able to reflect upon our experiences there with devices and connectivity, and preparing ourselves, obviously, to be flexible in the event that we have to go back to a system where we are entirely remote again. And I believe to be in what the governor is going to be coming out with, certainly, is expectations for schools to have plans that will meet each of the various phases the 6 phases that are set up in the state plan for reopening. So that if you're on stage 4, like we are now, and there happens to be a resurgence in your particular area, and you have to slide back to stage 3, that you have plans as a school district available for meeting the needs of stage 3, and so on. And so we're working as districts to plan accordingly, to have flexible plans that allow us to shift, basically at a moment's notice to slide back into a remote type setting. And so the devices, the connectivity is a huge piece of that. And so, our particular situation was such that we could afford to provide families, one device per family. And of course that creates some complications if you have more than one child and you're vying for, a computer access at the same time. And so, we're gradually building our reserves to meet more of those needs as we go. And certainly some of our COVID monies that we've received is helping to assist in providing additional devices and connectivity for those families, so that we can, in the future, go more than just one device per family.
Put the budget aside, how do you teach young kids social distancing and to wear a mask in a classroom?
Yeah, those are protocols that we will be addressing as we approach what we're planning to be the first day of school. So we will be having lessons, because we need to teach the students. We can't assume that they're getting that from home. So we will be teaching the students about the proper protocols, about mask wearing, temperature taking, all of the new protocols that'll be in place as school starts, because school in session will look vastly different than school in session back in February did. So, and so we need to be intentional in instructing students, how we walk in the hallways, when we wear a mask, how we wear a mask, hand washing, temperature taking. I mean, all of those things we have to be very intentional about instructing and also monitoring. So it becomes, a part of the culture. It's going to be the new part of the in-school culture. So we have to be deliberate about that instruction. And so those are in our plans for those first couple days of school as we have students.
How much of an additional stress is this going to be for the teachers? Will they be the ones responsible for making sure those measures are being followed?
Certainly, in part, they're going to have to be. All school staff is frankly going to have to be involved in the monitoring and setting the examples and in the instructing of those safety protocols.
Dr. James Schwarz, the superintendent of Avondale Schools, with us on the Oakland County Megacast on a family of TV and radio stations, as well as the Facebook page of Birmingham Bloomfield's Chamber of Commerce, our Facebook partner today, live with us all throughout the show. Dr. Schwarz, you were recently on a town hall, Representative Brenda Carter's K-12 Education Experience town hall with a number of other superintendents in the local area, and one topic that came up was, what do you do in terms of when you have distance learning in place, either a day where everyone's learning remotely or you have to take a virtual day for one reason or another, and you have a situation where parents are back at work, they're not going to be at home, they're not going to be able to supervise their kids. Pontiac Superintendent Kelly Williams mentioned partnerships within the Pontiac community and organizations that will take those kids in for the day and help monitor them so that their parents are not having to worry about childcare on top of how their child's going to be educated on those virtual days. Any plans of the like in communication or already set in place in Avondale schools?
So in terms of the remoteness, we are looking at our staffing models to see how we can incorporate that in-house. We don't have the type of community organizations that Pontiac has that they've been fortunate to tap into. So we're going to be looking in-house in terms of how we assist with that, with the structure of the day. And again, we haven't gotten to where we're announcing any type of granularity with that yet, because we're still waiting for some of the final details to come out from, the governor's plan and so on, before we go public with any granularity. But we're certainly looking at those types of scenarios. And again, we're not going to be able to meet everybody's needs. No one is in these circumstances, but we certainly want to be able to meet the needs of the majority, the masses. You're always going to have the isolate type of situations that you're not going to be able to meet. But we're trying the best that we can to meet the most that we can.
Dr. James Schwarz, just another couple minutes with you before we have to let you go. Another thing that's on a lot of people's minds and a lot of school districts' minds going forward is what is the sports landscape going to look like in the fall? School athletics are a huge part, especially at the middle school and the high school level, for the experience of the kids and their learning both inside and outside the classroom, as well as their social learning as well in the school. In terms of what we are looking at for athletics at Avondale High School in the fall, anything that's not going to be in place as opposed to normal, or there just different rules and regulations that the school district's putting in place for its athletics teams as they begin to practice?
Right. So we have practices that are going on right now, and they're certainly following all of the MHSAA guidelines. That's the Michigan High School Athletic Association guidelines, and with social distancing, with the wearing of masks. So right now we've got some football conditioning that's going on, and it seems to be going just fine, and the kids are respecting those protocols, which is great. We're getting a lot of cooperation from students and from parents alike. I expect that MHSAA will be giving further guidance for high school athletics as we get into the month of July, particularly if there's any phase changes in the return to school, or the return to normalcy plan of the governors. So we'll be anticipating further guidance with that. But I do suspect that we will go into the fall, with sports being played. I don't know which sports yet. I mean, there's some rumor mill that we may have a flip-flop where we may have spring sports done in the fall and fall sports done in the spring. Those that are more contact laden, like football, may be a spring sport, whereas baseball may come in as a fall sport. So these are things that MHSAA right now is grappling with. And I do expect that there will be a limitation on spectators in terms of what is allowed with in attendance at games, following social distancing and mask wearing and all of those things. So we're certainly prepared for those. Again, we're just waiting for that guidance, but they've all of those components have been in discussions of ours.
Dr. Schwarz, we thank you for being with us. Anything else before we have to let you go?
No, not at this time. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, always a pleasure to have you on with us. Dr. James Schwarz, the Superintendent of Avondale Schools, with us on the Oakland County MegaCast.